Imagine creating something that changes the world, but feeling like you don't belong in it. Julian Croft was a titan of the software industry, an architect of digital empires. His code was elegant, his strategies were flawless, and his company, Synaptic Future, was the envy of Silicon Valley. But in the world he built, a world that worshipped sleek, polished perfection, Julian felt like a ghost in his own machine. The whispers were his shadow, following him from the hushed reverence of the server rooms to the gleaming glass of the boardroom. At industry galas where his genius was celebrated, he saw the fleeting glances, the quick, appraising stares that had nothing to do with his mind and everything to do with his body. He was a visionary trapped in a vessel society deemed unworthy. But sometimes the code that rewrites your entire operating system isn't found in a secure server, but in the most unexpected of places. The city lights of San Francisco blurred into a smear of indifferent neon as Julian's car, a custom-built machine of silent electric power, navigated the streets. He had no destination in mind, just a desperate need to escape the crushing weight of his own life. He ended up in a part of the city he hadn't seen in years, a neighborhood of brick and neon where time seemed to move a little slower. He parked in front of a small 24-hour diner, the kind of place that smelled of old coffee and quiet desperation. It was a world away from the Michelin-starred restaurants and exclusive clubs he was supposed to frequent. He almost drove away. "Table for one?" a voice asked, cutting through the low hum of the diner. It was warm, with no trace of the manufactured politeness he was used to. He looked up to see a young woman with tired but kind eyes and a smile that seemed to defy the late hour. There was no judgment in her gaze, no flicker of surprise or disdain, just a simple human welcome. "Yes, please," Julian managed to say, the word feeling foreign in his mouth. He felt the thick corporate armor he wore every day begin to crack just a little. Her name tag read Clara. She led him to a worn vinyl booth in the corner. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, hon," she said, her voice a soft counterpoint to the clatter of plates from the kitchen. "Long day?" Julian blinked, caught off guard. People didn't talk to him like this. They pitched him, they flattered him, they feared him, but they never simply saw him. "You could say that," he replied, the understatement hanging heavy in the air. Clara laughed, a genuine, unforced sound. "Well, you came to the right place. Our coffee can't solve your problems, but it's a pretty good listener, and a pie has been known to work miracles." As she walked away, Julian watched her. He observed the easy way she moved, the genuine rapport she had with the other late-night patrons, the way she made each person feel seen. His phone vibrated, a harsh intrusion of his other life, a text from Marcus, his COO. "Board dinner moved to 8. Mr. Sterling wants to discuss the Vanguard acquisition. Wear the blue suit. It's more commanding." Julian winced. Marcus Thorne, the man he'd trusted, the man he'd brought up with him. His comments were always like this. Small, carefully placed cuts disguised as helpful advice. Last week, it was a suggestion to take meetings standing up because it was more flattering on camera. The week before, it was a passive-aggressive comment about projecting vitality to the investors. "Here you go," Clara announced, sliding a steaming mug of coffee in front of him and a slice of apple pie on the house. "You look like you need a win tonight." Julian stared at the pie. "I shouldn't." "Says who?" Clara asked, leaning against the booth. "The ghosts in the boardroom? Honey, you're not in the boardroom now. You're in a place where a slice of pie is just a slice of pie. No strings, no agenda." He'd never met anyone so direct, so unafraid. He picked up his fork. "I'm Julian, and no, I don't usually do this." "Well, Julian, I'm Clara, and welcome to the land of who cares what they think." Her smile was a small beacon in the vast darkness of his night. "So, what brings a man who is clearly important, obviously brilliant, and looks like he's about to break, to my little corner of the world?" The question was so blunt, so honest, it disarmed him completely. The walls he'd spent a lifetime building began to crumble. "I run a software company." he said, the words feeling inadequate, and sometimes it's a lot. Clara nodded, her eyes full of a wisdom that seemed to stretch far beyond her years. Ah, one of those worlds where they expect you to be a superhero 24/7. Let me guess, they love your brain, but they judge the packaging it comes in? The words hit him with the force of a physical blow. It was everything he felt, everything he'd never said aloud, spoken so simply, so clearly. He could only nod. Clara's expression softened. "I used to be a gymnast," she said quietly. "All I ever wanted to do was fly. But I was told I didn't have the right body, too muscular, not delicate enough. I let one person's opinion clip my wings. Don't you ever let them clip yours." His phone rang, Marcus's name flashing on the screen. He had to take it. "Julian, where are you?" Marcus's voice was sharp, annoyed. "Sterling's team is here. Frankly, we need you to look your best. This is a billion-dollar deal." Julian's face burned with a familiar, cold shame. He could feel Clara watching, her earlier words echoing in his mind. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Julian said, his voice tight. "Make it 15. And Julian, try to project some energy. They need to see a leader." The line went dead. Julian sat there, the weight of the world crashing back down on him heavier than ever before. Clara reached across the table, not with pity, but with a quiet solidarity. "Whoever that was," she said, her voice firm, "they have no idea who they're talking to." Julian looked up, startled. "I heard enough," she continued, "and I see you. I see someone who has built incredible things, someone who is carrying far too much. Don't you ever forget that you are the architect, not them. You are the one who builds worlds." He had to go. As he stood, fumbling for his wallet, Clara scribbled something on a napkin. "My number," she said, "for when you need a reminder that you're more than their balance sheets and their narrow-minded expectation." He took the napkin, his fingers trembling slightly. As he walked out into the cold night air, Clara called after him, "Hey, Julian, they're lucky to have you. Don't you let them convince you otherwise." He made it to his car before the carefully constructed dam inside him broke, but for the first time in a very long time, they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of a deep, aching gratitude for a single moment of human connection. As he drove towards the gleaming towers of the financial district, he had no idea that Marcus Thorne was already setting a trap, a meticulously planned betrayal that would test everything Julian thought he knew about loyalty, power, and the devastating cost of being different in a world that demanded everyone be the same. The boardroom at Synaptic Future was a cathedral of glass and steel, overlooking the city that Julian had in many ways helped to build. But as he entered, he felt less like a king in his castle and more like a defendant entering a courtroom. The 12 faces around the table turned to him, their expressions a mixture of expectation and appraisal. Marcus Thorne's smile was a thin, sharp line. "Julian, glad you could make it. The Vanguard team is ready for us." His eyes did a quick, dismissive scan of Julian's suit, a silent judgment that spoke volumes. "Shall we proceed?" Julian took his seat at the head of the table, the place he had earned 1,000 times over. But his mind wasn't on the billion-dollar acquisition. It was on a worn vinyl booth in a late-night diner, and the simple, powerful words of a woman who had seen him not as a CEO, but as a human being. "You are the architect, not them." The Vanguard executives entered, a trio of men in perfectly tailored suits, their faces interchangeable masks of corporate ambition. Their leader, a man named Sterling, offered Julian a handshake that felt more like an evaluation, his eyes lingering for a split second too long on Julian's frame before meeting his gaze. "Mr. Croft," he said, his voice smooth as polished granite, "your company's reputation is formidable." The compliment was delivered with a tone that suggested Julian himself was not. "Mr. Sterling, I trust our proposal meets your expectations," Julian replied, his voice calm and steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. But he saw it. He saw the way Sterling's gaze kept drifting to Marcus, the way their questions were subtly directed at his COO. "Indeed," Sterling said, steepling his fingers. "Though we do have some concerns, not about the technology, of course, but about the public-facing aspects of leadership." Marcus leaned forward, a predator sensing weakness. "An interesting point, Mr. Sterling. Perhaps you could elaborate for us?" A cold dread seeped into Julian's bones. This was it, the carefully orchestrated ambush. "Well," Sterling continued, his gaze still fixed on Marcus, "an acquisition of this magnitude requires absolute confidence from our shareholders. The face of the company becomes, in essence, the face of their investment. They look for a certain dynamism, a leader who embodies the aggressive, forward-moving nature of the market." The air in the room grew thin. Every eye was on Julian. Every mind was processing the coded insult. He was being weighed, measured, and found wanting, not for his intellect or his vision, but for his physical form. "Our growth has outpaced the market for 10 consecutive quarters," Julian stated, his voice a low, even rumble. "The numbers speak for themselves." "Numbers are a snapshot of a past," Sterling countered smoothly. "We are investing in the future, in brand perception, in the story we tell the world." Marcus's smile was now one of pure triumph. "Perhaps this is a conversation best had in a more focused setting. Julian, would you mind giving us a few minutes to discuss the strategic alignment?" The request was a public execution. To be dismissed from a negotiation in his own boardroom in front of his own team. The humiliation was a physical fire in his chest. Julian stood, his movements slow and deliberate, a mask of calm composure firmly in place. "Of course," he said, his voice betraying no emotion. "Take all the time you need." He walked out, his head held high, but the moment the heavy glass door hissed shut, he leaned against the cool wall, his breath catching in his throat. Through the soundproof glass, he could see the scene unfolding like a silent movie. Marcus, animated and confident, gesturing emphatically. Sterling nodding in agreement. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. He opened the text. "How'd the big meeting go?" "Clara." He stared at the name, a lifeline in a storm of betrayal. In the span of a few hours, he had swung from feeling utterly alone to feeling seen, and now back to being brutally invisible. He typed a reply, his thumbs clumsy. "A disaster. They're in my boardroom making a deal for my company without me." The response was instantaneous. "What? Are they insane? You built that company. You are that company. Apparently, I'm not the right look for the brand. Their brand is garbage then. Don't listen to them. Want to talk later? I'm off in an hour." Julian hesitated. He had never leaned on anyone, never shown this kind of vulnerability. But the thought of hearing her voice, a voice free of judgment and ambition, was an anchor in the spinning chaos of his world. "I'm flying to New York tonight for another meeting. Rain check, deal. But Julian, listen to me. Don't you let them take what is yours. You're bigger than all of them in every way that matters." The boardroom door swung open. Marcus emerged, his face a mask of false sincerity. "Julian, we need to talk." Back in the boardroom, the Vanguard team was gone. The air was thick with the ghost of their presence. "Well," Marcus began, loosening his tie as if to signal the end of a strenuous performance. That was productive. "Sterling is very interested, but he has reservations about the leadership." "What kind of reservations?" Julian asked, his voice flat, already knowing the answer. "Julian, you're a genius, a true visionary. No one doubts your mind," Marcus said, each word a carefully polished stone of condescension. "But the market is what it is. Image sells. Investors want to see leaders who project health, success. They want someone who looks the part." Each word was a dagger, twisted with precision. "I built this company from a single line of code in my garage," Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I turned a dream into a billion-dollar reality. And that's why this is so difficult," Marcus said, his voice dripping with faux empathy. "Sterling's offer is transformative. It secures the future for everyone here, for all our employees." "What are you suggesting, Marcus?" Marcus turned to face the window, looking out at the city lights as if he already owned them. "I'm suggesting we put the company first. Perhaps it's time for a transition. You could move into a Chief Innovation Officer role. Focus on what you do best, the technology. I could step into the CEO role, handle the public relations, the investor calls, the face-to-face." The betrayal was absolute, a clean, deep cut. Marcus had been his right hand, his confidant, his supposed friend. "This is my company," Julian whispered, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. "It's our company," Marcus corrected him, "and the greatest leaders are the ones who know when it's time to step aside for the good of the team." "I need time to think," Julian said, his mind numb. "Of course, but Sterling needs an answer by the end of the week. Don't take too long." Julian gathered his things, his movements stiff and robotic. As he reached the door, Marcus's voice stopped him. "Julian, this isn't personal. It's just business." But as their eyes met, they both knew that was the most profound lie of all. On the flight to New York, soaring miles above the world, Julian felt completely untethered. He stared out at the endless expanse of clouds and felt Clara's words resonate in the silence. "Don't you let them take what is yours." But what if Marcus was right? What if his presence, his very existence, was holding back the company, the people he had dedicated his life to building? His phone lit up with another text from Clara. "Hey, just checking in. Remember your own strength." For the first time that night, a genuine smile touched Julian's lip. He typed back, "Thank you. I needed that more than you know." The reply was immediate. "Anytime. That's what friends are for. Friends." The word felt strange and new. As the plane began its descent, casting a shadow over the sleeping city below, Julian made a resolution. He would not surrender, he would not be erased, but he had no idea that Marcus had already put the next phase of his plan into motion, a plan designed to break not just Julian's control of the company, but his spirit. The battle for Synaptic Future had only just begun. Julian's suite at the Mandarin Oriental offered a panoramic view of Central Park, but the beauty was lost on him. The city below felt like a hostile territory, a concrete jungle where predators like Marcus Thorne roamed free. He stood by the window, still in the suit from the disastrous meeting, replaying Marcus's betrayal over and over in his mind. His phone rang. It was his mother. "Julian, darling, how was your day?" Her voice was a warm echo from a simpler time. "It was fine, Mom," he lied, the words tasting like poison. "Just work. You sound exhausted. Are you getting enough rest? Are you eating properly?" The irony was a bitter pill. His mother worried about his health while the world punished him for the very body she had given him. "I'm fine, really," he insisted. "Julian Alexander Croft, I am your mother. I know when you are not fine. Tell me what happened." The use of his full name, a relic from a childhood spent hiding from bullies on the playground, shattered his composure. Suddenly, he was 10 years old again, crying in his room because the other kids had called him cruel names. "They want me to step down, Mom," he said, his voice cracking, a sharp silence on the other end of the line. "Who? Who wants you to step down from the company you built with your own 2 hands?" "Marcus. He thinks I'm not the right face for the company." An investor implied I wasn't marketable. He heard his mother's sharp, angry intake of breath. "That snake. After everything you've done for him. Honey, listen to me. You are a giant in your industry. You are one of the most brilliant minds of your generation. But I'm not thin, Mom. I'm not what they want to see on the cover of a magazine. And in their world, that's all that seems to matter. Your father and I did not raise you to let the opinions of small, petty people define your value, she said, her voice fierce. Do you remember what I used to tell you when you were a boy? A sad smile touched his lips, that I was made of stardust and genius. And you still are, she said softly. Don't you ever let them make you feel like you are anything less. Hanging up, Julian felt a flicker of his old fire return, but the doubt was a persistent, gnawing beast. An email notification chimed on his laptop. It was from Marcus, addressed to the entire executive team. Following some very productive discussions with Vanguard Industries, we are exploring some exciting new avenues for corporate growth and leadership optimization. I will keep you all apprised. Marcus was already seizing control, positioning himself as the leader, CCing Julian on an email about his own company's future as if he were a junior analyst. His phone buzzed again. It was Clara. Hey, I know it's late out there. Couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. How are you holding up? The simple act of her reaching out felt like a lifeline. He found himself typing back with a raw honesty he hadn't shown anyone in years. Honestly, I feel like I'm in a free fall. My COO is orchestrating a coup, and a part of me is starting to believe he's right. A moment later, a new message appeared. Can you video call? Sometimes it's easier to fight the ghosts when you can see a friendly face. Julian hesitated. He looked like hell. His eyes were red, his suit was rumpled, his carefully constructed facade was in ruins, but the thought of her unwavering, non-judgmental presence was too powerful to resist. He accepted the call. Clara's face filled the screen, her warm smile a stark contrast to the cold emptiness of his hotel suite. She was in a small, cozy-looking apartment, fairy lights strung up behind her. There he is, she said gently. You look like you've been to war. I think I'm losing, he confessed, his voice hoarse. Then tell me everything, she said, her expression serious, and don't leave out any details. I want to understand exactly who we're up against. So he told her. He told her about the years of subtle digs, the backhanded compliments, the constant drainage pressure to be someone he wasn't. He told her about Marcus's calculated betrayal, Sterling's coded insult, the soul-crushing feeling of being erased from his own story. Clara listened intently, her anger growing with every word. Okay, she said, the moment he finished. First off, this Marcus guy is a parasite, a spineless, opportunistic parasite. The bluntness of it startled a small laugh out of him. Second, and this is the most important part, you have to understand that this isn't about business. Not really. What do you mean? Julian asked. This is a power grab, plain and simple, she said, leaning closer to her camera. This weasel sees a chance to steal everything you've built, and he's using society's messed up, idiotic standards about what people should look like as his weapon. It's the oldest con in the book. Make a person feel worthless, and they'll hand over their crown without a fight. The clarity of her words was like a lightning strike. I never saw it that way. Because you're a creator, not a destroyer. You assume people operate with integrity, but some people are just sharks, Julian. They circle and they wait for the first sign of blood in the water. She paused, her eyes locking with his through the screen. Can I tell you a secret? I told you I used to be a gymnast. What I didn't tell you is that I was good enough to go to the Olympics. I had the skill, the drive, the passion, but my coach, a woman I idolized, told me I'd never make it to that level. She said my thighs were too thick, that I didn't have the aesthetic the judges wanted. What did you do? He asked, captivated. I quit, she said, her voice tinged with an old, deep regret. I walked away from the only thing I'd ever loved because I let one person's prejudice become my reality. It's the single biggest mistake of my life. You know what I should have done? I should have found a new coach, I should have found a new gym. I should have told her to go to hell and then gone on to win a gold medal. She leaned in again, her voice dropping to an intense whisper. You were just a kid, Clara. Exactly, and you're not. You're a grown man who built an empire. You have the power to fight this. The only question is, are you going to let a parasite like Marcus write the end of your story? Or are you going to remind him what happens when you try to cage a titan? A dormant fire began to stir in Julian's chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced since the early hungry days of his company. I don't even know where to begin, he admitted. You begin by gathering your army, she said instantly. Lawyers, allies on the board, people loyal to you, not the company. You document every single slight, every email, every conversation. And most of all, you remember who you are. You are Julian freaking Croft. They talked for another hour. Clara, with her stories of rude customers and impossible landlords, somehow managed to make his billion-dollar problems feel conquerable. She made him laugh, a real, genuine laugh that seemed to echo in the cavernous suite. I should let you sleep, Julian said finally, feeling lighter than he had in days. Julian, she said, her tone serious again, promise me one thing. Don't make any decisions from a place of fear or shame. Wait until you feel strong again. Then you decide what to do. I promise. Good, she said, her smile returning. And for what it's worth, I am so incredibly proud of you. For what you've built, for who you are, for being brave enough to even have this conversation with a random waitress you just met. After they hung up, Julian walked back to the window. The city lights seemed different now, not hostile, but full of possibility. Clara was right. Marcus was counting on his shame. He was counting on Julian to quietly disappear, but Julian Croft had not become a titan by disappearing. He opened his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard, typing an email to his personal attorney. If Marcus wanted a war, he would get one. As he worked, a final text came through from Clara. Sweet dreams, architect. Tomorrow, we start drawing the new blueprints. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Julian believed it was possible. He had an ally, someone who saw his value when he had been unable to see it himself. But neither of them knew that Marcus's plan was far more insidious than a simple boardroom coup. By morning, the battle would move to a new, terrifyingly public arena, and it would test not only Julian's resolve, but the fragile, newfound friendship that had become his only anchor. Julian landed back in San Francisco at dawn, the city still shrouded in a cool gray fog. He didn't go home. He went straight to the office, a warrior returning to the battlefield. He needed to be there before Marcus, before anyone else. He needed to reclaim his space. His lawyer's response to his late-night email had been sobering. Without a smoking gun, proving discriminatory intent in a corporate dispute was notoriously difficult. It would be Marcus's word against his. So he began to build his case, sifting through years of emails, meeting notes, and performance reviews, searching for the pattern of subtle sabotage he now saw so clearly. The suggestions about his public image, the times he was excluded from key investor meetings, the way Marcus consistently positioned himself as the face of the company. At 8:30, his executive assistant, a young woman named Chloe, who had been with him since the beginning, knocked on his open door. Her face was pale. "Julian, Marcus has called an emergency all-hands meeting for 9 o'clock. His stomach turned to ice. Did he give a reason? He said it's about ensuring leadership stability and a seamless transition forward. The corporate jargon was a thinly veiled declaration of war, a coup. His phone vibrated, a text from Clara. "Good morning, architect. Ready to build something amazing today?" He typed back, his hands surprisingly steady. "About to walk into an ambush? Wish me luck?" The reply was instant. "Titans don't need luck. They make their own. Go show them who's in charge. I'm with you." Her simple, unwavering belief was a shield. He straightened his tie, squared his shoulders, and prepared for the fight of his life. The large atrium, usually buzzing with the creative energy of his employees, was silent and tense. Everyone was there, hundreds of the brightest minds in the tech industry, their faces a sea of confusion and anxiety. Marcus stood on the central staircase, a self-appointed king addressing his court. He was wearing the blue suit he had recommended for Julian, a petty, deliberate act of dominance. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, his voice radiating a false sincerity that made Julian's skin crawl. He didn't even acknowledge Julian, who stood at the back of the crowd. "I've called this meeting because, as a company, we are at a critical juncture. We have an opportunity for unprecedented growth, an opportunity that will secure all of our futures." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "However, to seize this future, we require a leadership that is agile, dynamic, and fully aligned with the expectations of our partners and the market." Every word was a poisoned dart aimed at Julian. "What does that mean?" someone shouted from the crowd. "It means," Marcus said, his eyes scanning the room, "that Synaptic Future needs a leader who can be the public face of our brand, someone who can inspire confidence not just in our products but in our image." And it has become clear that Julian, for all his technical genius, is not that person. A wave of murmurs and gasps swept through the atrium. Julian felt hundreds of eyes turn to him, searching his face for a reaction. "Therefore," Marcus continued, his voice rising, "after consulting with key stakeholders and board members, I have agreed to step into the role of interim CEO, effective immediately, to guide us through this transition." "That's interesting," Julian's voice boomed from the back, amplified by the atrium's acoustics. The crowd parted as he walked forward, not with anger, but with a cold, focused calm. "Because, as the founder, chairman, and majority shareholder of this company, I don't recall approving any such transition." Marcus's composure flickered for a fraction of a second. "Julian, this is a private matter for the board. Don't make a scene." "A scene?" Julian asked, stopping at the foot of the stairs, looking up at the man who had been his friend. "You're trying to steal the company I built in front of the people who helped me build it, and you're worried about a scene?" He turned to address his employees, his people. "For 10 years, we have built this company on a single principle, that the best idea wins. That merit, and merit alone, is what matters. We have never cared where someone came from, what they looked like, or who they loved. We only cared about the quality of their work and the power of their minds." He looked back at Marcus. "Now, this man who you all know, is asking you to throw all of that away. He is suggesting that we adopt the shallow, prejudiced values of our competitors. He is telling you that image is more important than innovation, that the packaging matters more than the genius inside. He is asking you to become everything we have always fought against. This is about securing our future," Marcus retorted, his voice strained. "No!" Julian's voice thundered. "This is about you securing your future. This is about your ambition, your greed, and your willingness to use discrimination as a stepping stone." He pulled out his phone and held it up. "I have here an email from our potential partners at Vanguard, sent to me by a confidential source, detailing their private conversations with Marcus. Conversations where Marcus himself first raised concerns about my marketability. Conversations where he positioned himself as the solution to a problem he created." The energy in the room shifted palpably. The faces that had been confused were now angry. "He is selling you a lie," Julian continued, his voice resonating with passion. "He is telling you that I am the obstacle to your success. But look around you. Look at what we have built together. We have changed the world once, and we are on the verge of doing it again. The only obstacle in this room is a man who believes that a person's worth can be measured by the size of their suit." "This is slander," Marcus sputtered, his face ashen. "It's the truth," Julian said simply. "And now everyone here knows it." He turned back to the crowd. "This is still my company, and I am still its CEO. Anyone who believes in our original mission is welcome to stay and help me build the future. Anyone who believes that a person's appearance is more important than their ability is welcome to follow Mr. Thorne out the door." For a moment, there was a stunned silence. Then a single engineer in the front row began to clap. He was joined by another and then another, until the entire atrium was filled with a thunderous applause that was not just for Julian, but for the principles he had just defended. Marcus stood alone on the staircase, a king with no subjects, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He walked down the stairs, and as he passed Julian, he hissed, "You think you've won? This is far from over." "I know," Julian replied, his voice calm, "but whatever comes next, you'll have to face the fact that you underestimated the wrong man." As Marcus stormed out of the building, Julian felt a surge of triumph. He had faced his demon, not just the external one in a blue suit, but the internal one that had whispered words of doubt and shame in his ear for years. But his victory was a fleeting one. As he looked out at the faces of his loyal team, he had no idea that Marcus had already fired his next shot, a vicious public attack that would turn Julian's personal battle into a global spectacle. The war was no longer contained within the walls of Synaptic Future. It was about to go viral. The blowback was immediate and brutal. Before Julian had even left the office, the story was everywhere. A major tech blog, clearly fed by Marcus, published an article with a headline, "Chaos at Synaptic Future. Founders' erratic behavior sparks leadership crisis." It was a masterclass in corporate assassination, painting Julian as an unstable emotional leader and Marcus as the voice of reason, trying to save the company from itself. By evening, the narrative had solidified. The story was no longer about a boardroom dispute. It was about Julian's fitness to lead. His physical appearance, once the subtext, was now the explicit text. Social media became a cesspool of cruelty. Anonymous trolls and armchair critics dissected his body, his health, his very right to occupy a position of power. The hashtag for a synaptic meltdown was trending. He was a caricature, a meme, a cautionary tale. Julian sat in his penthouse, the city lights twinkling below like 1,000 mocking eyes, and watched his life's work being dismantled tweet by tweet. Every notification on his phone was a fresh wave of poison. Tech titan too big for his own company? Is Julian Croft a new face of corporate liability? The comments were a torrent of bile, a digital mob armed with pitchforks and cruelty. His assistant Chloe called, her voice trembling, "Julian, there are reporters camped outside the building, paparazzi. They're shouting questions about a forced health leave." Forced health leave. Marcus was not just trying to take his company. He was trying to erase his legitimacy, to pathologize his very existence. His phone rang incessantly. Board members, investors, even distant relatives, all calling to ask if the stories were true, if he was okay, if he was planning to step down for the good of the company. He stopped answering. He felt himself shrinking, the giant of the tech world reduced to a scared man in a glass tower. The board, panicked by the negative press, sent a formal email. "Julian, In light of a current media storm, the board has voted to place you on a temporary paid leave of absence effective immediately. We believe this is the best course of action to protect shareholder value. It was exile, wrapped in the sterile language of corporate governance. He stared at the email, the words blurring through a haze of disbelief and despair. He had won the battle in the atrium, but he was losing the war for public perception. His phone buzzed. It was Clara. "Just saw the news. It's all lies. Are you all right?" He almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. He was the furthest thing from all right. "No," he typed back, the single word a confession of his utter defeat. "I think I've lost. They've won. Where are you?" "My apartment. Hiding. Can you get out of there without being seen?" "There's a service exit. Why?" "Because you shouldn't be alone right now. And I just landed at SFO." Julian's heart stopped. He read the message again. Landed. As in, had flown across the country. "What? Why are you here?" "Because I told you I was with you." The reply came instantly. "And architects shouldn't be left alone when their buildings are under attack. I'm in a cab. I'll be at your front door in 20 minutes. Figure out how to get me past the media circus." He couldn't process it. In his entire life, no one had ever shown up for him like this. Colleagues offered support when it was convenient. Family offered love from a distance. But no one had ever simply crossed a continent to stand beside him in the fire. He met her in the building's underground parking garage, a clandestine meeting point befitting his new status as a corporate fugitive. The moment he saw her standing there with a small backpack and a look of fierce determination on her face, the crushing weight on his chest eased just a fraction. "There's my Titan," she said, pulling him into a hug that was surprisingly strong. "Ready to get out of the city for a while?" "Where would we go?" he asked, his voice raspy. "They're everywhere." Clara grinned, a flash of her old diner, managing confidence. "I have an idea. Trust me." 20 minutes later, they were in one of Julian's less conspicuous cars heading north over the Golden Gate Bridge. The iconic structure, usually a symbol of human ingenuity, felt like an escape route. Clara directed him to a secluded rental house she had booked from the taxi, a place tucked away in the coastal hills, offering privacy and a sweeping view of the Pacific Ocean. For the first time in days, Julian could breathe. They sat on the deck, the sound of the waves a soothing rhythm against the chaotic noise in his head. "So," Clara said gently, "tell me how it feels." And he did. He told her about the hollow victory in the atrium, the public humiliation, the soul-crushing feeling that maybe the trolls were right. "Maybe I am the problem," he finished, his voice barely a whisper. "Maybe I've been deluding myself, thinking I could belong in a world that so clearly doesn't want me." Clara listened, and when he was done, she didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. She just looked at him, her gaze steady and clear. "Okay," she said. "I'm only going to say this once, so listen carefully. That is the biggest load of crap I've ever heard in my life." The bluntness was a splash of cold water. "I'm serious," she continued, her voice filled with a powerful conviction. "You built a world-changing company. You created technology that has improved the lives of millions. You did all of that while navigating an industry that is fundamentally hostile to anyone who doesn't fit into their tiny little box. That doesn't make you a problem, Julian. That makes you a revolutionary. But the board is a group of rich people terrified of losing money," she cut in. "They aren't siding with Marcus because he's right. They're siding with him because he's easy. Standing up to prejudice is hard. Caving is easy. They're taking the easy way out. That doesn't make them right. It just makes them cowards." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. You're trying to fight them on their terms. You're trying to prove you're worthy by their standards, but their standards are broken. So why are you still playing their game? What other game is there? He asked, a flicker of something, not quite hope, but curiosity, sparking within him. The one where you stop trying to get back into their broken system and you start building a new one, she said, a smile playing on her lips. The one where you show them what real leadership, real innovation, real value looks like. The one where you make them regret the day they ever thought they could race you. They talked for hours, long into the night. Clara, with her simple, profound wisdom, helped him deconstruct the fortress of shame he had built around himself. She didn't give him a battle plan. She gave him something far more valuable, a new perspective. I have an idea, Julian said suddenly, the words feeling alive in his mouth. It's insane. It's impossible. I love insane, impossible ideas, she said, her eyes lighting up. Tell me, what if I let them have it? He said, the thought taking shape as he spoke. What if I stop fighting for my old company and I start a new one? Something so far ahead of them, they'll become obsolete in a year. Clara's smile was blinding. Now you're talking like the man who built an empire. The first real spark of excitement he'd felt in months ignited in his chest. I have the patents for the next-gen tech they don't even know about. I have the loyalty of my core engineering team, and I have something Marcus will never have. What's that? A reason. He's doing it for money and power. I'd be doing it to prove that genius doesn't have a dress code. Clara raised her water bottle in a makeshift toast to building new worlds and leaving the dinosaurs in the dust. Julian clinked his bottle against hers. He felt a sense of clarity, of purpose that had been buried under years of corporate politics and self-doubt. But as they sat there, planning a revolution under the stars, neither of them could have known that Marcus and the board were about to make their next move, a legal attack so vicious and personal it would threaten to destroy not just Julian's career, but the very foundation of his identity. The real fight was far from over. Julian awoke to the sound of his phone buzzing frantically on the nightstand. It was a cascade of notifications, a digital avalanche. The first message he saw was from Chloe, his assistant. Urgent! Call me now! The second was from his lawyer. They've filed an injunction. We need to talk immediately. The rest were a blur of headlines from news alerts, each one a dagger. Synaptic Future sues founder Julian Croft for breach of fiduciary duty. Lawsuit alleges Croft mentally unstable, claims he sabotaged Vanguard deal. Board seeks to strip Croft of all company holdings and intellectual property. He felt the air leave his lungs. This wasn't just a leave of absence anymore. This was a declaration of total war. They were trying to strip him of everything. His company, his patents, his reputation. They were trying to paint him as not just unfit, but insane. Clara appeared in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee, her face etched with concern. I saw, she said softly. It's all over the news. Julian was already dialing his lawyer. Tell me, this is a joke, he said the moment the call connected. I wish I could, Julian. His lawyer's voice was grim. They've filed a temporary restraining order preventing you from contacting any Synaptic employees or accessing any company assets. They're claiming your actions at the all-hands meeting were proof of emotional instability and that you deliberately scuttled a Vanguard deal for personal reasons. They're petitioning the court to have you removed from the board and to have your shares placed in a trust pending a full psychiatric evaluation. The words were so outrageous, so monstrous, they barely seemed real. A psychiatric evaluation. They were using his body against him, and now they were using his mind. Can they do that? Julian asked, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. They can try, his lawyer replied. And they can make it very, very ugly in the press. Julian, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to be a brutal public fight. After he hung up, Julian sank onto the edge of the bed, the phone slipping from his hand. He felt a cold, terrifying numbness spread through him. He had been so ready to fight back, to build something new. But how could he build anything when they were systematically destroying his past, his present, and his future? Okay, Clara said, her voice cutting through the fog of his despair. She sat down next to him, her presence a solid, grounding force. So that's their move. Now we make ours. What move, Clara? He said, his voice hollow. They have an army of lawyers. They have the board. They have the media. What do I have? Clara put her hand on his shoulder. You have the truth. You have the loyalty of the people who actually matter, and you have a brain that can think 10 moves ahead of them. You just need to stop letting them make you feel like a victim and start remembering that you are a king. They're trying to break me, he whispered. I know, she said, her voice fierce. So, are you going to let them? He looked at her, at this woman who had flown across the country for him, who was sitting with him in the middle of his life's implosion, and who still looked at him like he was a titan. A tiny, defiant spark flickered back to life within him. No, he said, the word gaining strength as he spoke it. No, I'm not. Good, she said, a small smile returned to her face. Then let's stop playing defense. You said you wanted to build something new. Let's start right now. For the next hour, the secluded house became a war room. Julian, fueled by coffee and a righteous fury, began to move with a speed and clarity he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a startup founder again, back in the garage, with everything on the line. First, he called David Chen, his head of engineering, on a secure line. David, he said, his voice urgent, I know about the injunction. I can't talk long. I have one question for you. If I start a new company right now today, how many of your team will walk out with you? David didn't hesitate. All of them, Julian, every last one. We didn't sign up to work for that corporate vulture. We signed up to work with you. Just tell us when and where. Get ready, Julian said. It's happening faster than we thought. Next, he called his top marketing guru and his lead UI designer. The response was the same. Their loyalty was to him, not to the company name on their paychecks. Finally, he made the most important call. He called Elena Van, a legendary venture capitalist known for backing disruptive visionary founders. He'd met her years ago, and she had always told him that Synaptic Future was just his first act. Elena, he said the moment she answered, I need your help. Julian, she replied, her voice sharp and perceptive. I've been reading the news. I assume you're not calling to tell me it's true. I'm calling to tell you I'm leaving Synaptic Future and starting something that will make it obsolete in 18 months, he said, the audacity of the statement invigorating him. I have the core team. I have the next generation patents they don't know exist. I need funding. Elena was silent for a long moment. How much? 50 million by end of day. Elena Vance laughed, a sound like cracking ice. I love your ambition, Julian. You've got a deal. Send me the deck. Let's go make those bastards regret the day they were born. By the time the sun was high in the sky, Julian Croft, a man who was legally barred from entering his own company, had a new team, a $50 million war chest, and a plan. A plan not just to survive, but to win. The board had called an emergency meeting for that afternoon to vote on the lawsuit. Julian, as a board member, was legally required to be there. As he drove back towards the city, with Clara in the passenger seat, he felt a strange sense of calm. He was walking back into the lion's den, but this time he was a different animal. The boardroom was a funeral. The board members, the same people who had celebrated his genius for years, now refused to meet his eyes. Marcus sat in Julian's chair at the head of the table, a smug, reptilian smile on his face. "Julian," the chairman began, his voice heavy with false gravitas, "we are here to discuss the unfortunate but necessary legal action." "Before you begin," Julian interrupted, his voice clear and strong, cutting through the tension in the room, "I have a statement to make." Marcus's smile tightened. "Julian, this is not the time for theatrics." "On the contrary," Julian said, standing up and placing his phone on the table. "It is the perfect time for business." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each board member. "Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position as CEO and as a member of the board of Synaptic Future." A collective gasp went through the room. Marcus looked utterly stunned. This was not how his plan was supposed to go. "However," Julian continued, his voice resonating with a newfound power, "I'm not here to fight you for the scraps of my old company. I'm here to offer you a lifeline for its future." He airdropped a file to the room's main display. A logo appeared on the giant screen, Nexus Dynamics. "What you're looking at," Julian announced, "is my new venture, a company built on next-generation AI integration technology based on patents you don't own, developed by a core team of engineers that, as of 9 a.m. this morning, have all resigned from Synaptic Future." The color drained from Marcus's face. "You can't do that. Your non-compete is voided the moment you filed a baseless defamatory lawsuit against me," Julian's lawyer said, stepping into the room with perfect timing. "And my new company isn't competing with your current business model, it's making it obsolete." Julian clicked to the next slide. "I have secured $50 million in Series A funding. Projections show us hitting a $1 billion valuation within 2 years. We will be your primary competitor, and we will win." He let that sink in. The silence in the room was absolute. "But," he said, his voice softening slightly, "as I said, I am here to offer you a lifeline. I am offering Synaptic Future a one-time opportunity to be our first major partner, a joint venture, your data centers and existing infrastructure in exchange for a 20% stake in Nexus Dynamics." The board members stared at the screen, their minds frantically calculating. It was an incredible offer, a chance to get in on the ground floor of what would undoubtedly be the next big thing. "If you decline," Julian said, "I will walk out of this room and build a company that will systematically dismantle every market you currently dominate. The choice is yours." Marcus shot to his feet. "This is extortion." "No," Julian said, looking him directly in the eye. "This is what happens when you poke a sleeping giant. It's just business." The room erupted into chaos. Board members were shouting, arguing, their allegiance shifting with a sudden seismic change in power. "You have until 5 o'clock today to accept," Julian said, picking up his phone. "After that, the offer is off the table." As he walked towards the door, Marcus shouted, his voice laced with desperate rage, "You can't do this! This company is who you are!" Julian paused at the door and looked back, not with anger, but with a kind of pity. And for the first time, he smiled a real, genuine smile. "No, Marcus," he said calmly. "This company is what I did. What I am about to do is who I am." Outside the boardroom, Clara was waiting. She didn't ask how it went. She just handed him a cup of coffee. "So," she said, her eyes sparkling, "ready to go build the future?" Julian took the coffee, the warmth spreading through his hands. "Let's go," he said. As the elevator doors closed, he knew that the war wasn't over, but For the first time, he was fighting on his own terms, on a battlefield of his own creation. The architect was finally drawing his own blueprints. 6 months later, the world was a different place. The headquarters of Nexus Dynamics wasn't a sterile glass tower, but a sprawling, collaborative campus buzzing with an almost tangible energy. It was a place built on the principles Julian had espoused in the atrium that fateful day. A place where ideas were the only currency that mattered. Julian walked through the main workspace, a space he had designed to foster creativity and collision, and he smiled. His team, now over 100 strong, was comprised of the best and brightest minds, a diverse group of creators who were building the future of artificial intelligence. "Julian," David Chen called out, jogging over with a tablet in his hand, his face alight with excitement. "The latest beta tests are off the charts. The predictive engine is learning at an exponential rate. It's not just revolutionary, it's sentient adjacent." Julian looked at the data, a complex, beautiful tapestry of code and logic. "This is incredible, David. Set up a meeting with the ethics committee. We need to stay 10 steps ahead of the implications." As David hurried off, Julian's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a link to a Forbes article sent by Clara. The headline read, "The Phoenix, How Julian Croft Turned Betrayal into a Billion-Dollar Empire." The article detailed the spectacular rise of Nexus Dynamics, now valued at over $2 billion, and the quiet, ignominious decline of Synaptic Future, which had accepted his partnership offer and was now essentially a subsidiary of his new, more powerful venture. It also mentioned the downfall of Marcus Thorne, who had been unceremoniously fired by the board and was now facing SEC investigations for his attempts to manipulate the stock price during the Vanguard negotiations. Julian had felt no joy at Marcus's fall, only a quiet sense of justice. "Great article," he texted Clara back, but they missed the most important part of the story. "What's that?" she replied. "The brilliant, wise-cracking waitress who rebooted the whole system." A laughing emoji appeared. "She sounds amazing. You should give her a raise. Speaking of which, dinner tonight, my place. I have news." "Good news or great news?" he typed. "Life-changing news? 7 p.m.? Don't be late." Clara had moved to San Francisco 3 months after Nexus Dynamics was founded. She'd taken a role as the head of operations for a nonprofit that provided culinary trainings to underprivileged youth. Their friendship, forged in the crucible of his professional crisis, had become the bedrock of his new life. It was a partnership deeper and more meaningful than any business deal. Later that day, Julian met with Elena Vance, his lead investor. "The underwriters are recommending we go public within the year," she said, her tone matter of fact. "Conservative estimates put the IPO valuation at $10 billion. Julian stared at her, the number too vast to fully comprehend. $10 billion. A year ago, he had been fighting for his professional survival. Now, he was on the verge of becoming one of the wealthiest, most influential people in the world. "Julian," Elena said, her sharp gaze softening for a moment, "you did it. You didn't just win. You rewrote the rules of the game." After she left, Julian stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his office, looking out at the bay. He saw his reflection in the glass, the same man, the same body, but everything was different. The world hadn't changed. He had. The shame that had been his constant companion for so long was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. He had been told he wasn't the right face for a company, so he had built a company that was so powerful, so innovative, it no longer needed a face, only a vision. That evening, he arrived at Clara's apartment, a small, charming place filled with plants and the smell of roasting garlic. "You're late," she said, opening the door with a smile. "I was busy changing the world." he replied, handing her a bottle of wine. "What's this life-changing news?" They sat down to dinner, and Clara, her eyes sparkling with an excitement he'd never seen before, told him her news. The nonprofit she worked for had just received a massive anonymous donation, enough to expand their program nationwide. "We can help thousands of kids now, Julian," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's a dream come true." "That's incredible, Clara," he said, his heart swelling with pride for her. "Who was the donor?" Clara looked at him, her expression a mixture of love and exasperation. "Oh, I have no idea," she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. "Probably just some mysterious, brilliant, and ridiculously generous tech billionaire who happens to have a soft spot for underdog stories." He smiled, a genuine, unreserved smile. "He sounds like a great guy." "He is," she said softly. "Now, it's your turn. I have a feeling you have some news of your own." He took a deep breath. The IPO could be valued at $10 billion. Clara's jaw dropped. She was silent for a moment, processing the sheer scale of the number. Then she laughed, a bright, joyous sound that filled the small apartment. "Of course it is," she said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Because you're you." "I've been thinking a lot about what to do with it all," Julian said, his voice serious. "The money, the influence, it has to be for something more than just more." "I know," she said, her eyes understanding. "That's why I've decided to start a foundation," he continued, the idea now fully formed in his mind. "A foundation dedicated to funding and mentoring founders from underrepresented backgrounds. People with brilliant ideas who get told no because they don't fit the mold, because they don't have the right look." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Julian, I want to call it the Clara Foundation," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Because you were the first person who invested in me when I was broken. You saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. This foundation won't just give people money, Clara. It will give them what you gave me, a belief in their own worth." She was crying openly now, tears of joy streaming down her face. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help me run it," he said, his heart full. "Say you'll be my partner in this too." She threw her arms around him, holding him tight. "Yes," she whispered into his shoulder. "Of course, yes." They stood there for a long time, two people from different worlds who had found in each other a shared purpose. The tech titan and the waitress, ready to build a new world together. One, based not on shallow perceptions, but on the limitless power of the human spirit. "You know," Julian said softly, "a year ago, I thought my story was over." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes full of a love and gratitude that was more valuable than any IPO. Turns out, it was just the prologue, epilogue. 1 year later, the grand hall of the new Clara Foundation was filled with the chaotic, hopeful energy of its first cohort of fellows. They were a vibrant, diverse group of entrepreneurs, scientists and artists, people of all shapes, sizes, colors, and backgrounds. At the podium stood Julian Croft, no longer a phoenix rising from the ashes, but a quiet sun, radiating warmth and opportunity. "A few years ago," he began, his voice echoing through the hall, "I was told that I was not the right face for success. I was told that my value could be determined by a glance, that my body made me unfit to lead." The room was rapt, listening to a story that was, in many ways, their own. "For a time, I believed them," he confessed. "I almost let their narrow-minded definitions become my reality. But I was lucky. I met someone who reminded me that the only look that matters is the one you see when you look in the mirror. She reminded me that your body is not a liability. It is simply the vessel that carries your genius into the world." He paused, his gaze finding Clara in the front row. She was beaming, his partner in every way that mattered. "The world will try to put you in a box," he told the fellows, his voice rising with passion. "It will try to label you, to judge you, to make you smaller. Your job is not to fit into their boxes. Your job is to build your own worlds so fast and brilliant that their boxes become irrelevant." He looked out at the sea of faces, at the future of innovation. "You are not the unlikely success stories. You are the inevitable ones. You are what the world looks like when we finally stop judging the cover and start reading the book." The applause was deafening. It was the sound of a paradigm shifting. Later that evening, Julian and Clara walked along a quiet beach, the same one near the rental house, where they had planned their revolution. "Any regrets?" she asked, her hand in his. He looked at the vast, endless ocean, then back at her. "Just one," he said with a smile. "What's that?" "I wish I could go back and tell that scared man in the penthouse that everything was about to get so much better than he could ever imagine." Clara squeezed his hand. "I think," she said softly, "he knows that now." And as they watched the sunset, Julian Croft, the man who had been rejected, who had been erased, felt a profound sense of peace. He had not only changed his own life, he had created a world where countless others could now change theirs. Thank you for joining us on Julian's journey. If his story moved you, please subscribe for more tales of resilience and the power of the human spirit. Share this video with anyone who needs to be reminded of their own infinite worth. And tell us in the comments, what is the box you are ready to break out of? Remember, you are more than their labels. You are the architect of your own story. The world is waiting for what only you can build.